Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Virtual Voices. I'm Elizabeth Pruch with the Leadership Foundation. I get the pleasure of ensuring our alumni stay engaged no matter what's happening in our community. Virtual Voices is a series we developed in response to COVID-19 to keep you, our alumni, engaged, connected, and continuing to learn. We have asked leaders on the front lines of impacted industries to share their knowledge, their perspectives, and their leadership lessons. We've had a wonderful time bringing amazing folks to you all and are glad you're here with us. Today's a special day as well. We have also have Be Civic with us, one of our partners, and Be Civic members have been really interested in connecting with nonprofit leaders. And so we thought it'd be a wonderful way to collaborate and connect the two. Kirsten Vermeulen, the executive director, is on as well. Thank you for being here, Kirsten. And to any Be Civic members on the call, welcome as well. As I just mentioned, we're going to focus on nonprofits today, and we have two amazing leaders from this industry with us. I will introduce them in just a moment, but I want to start with a few housekeeping pieces. We are going to, this will be managed technically by Megan Vivier. She is on your screen. Hi, Megan. If you have any issues, please let her know through the chat function. She will help take care of you. And we are recording this session. So be sure to, if you have your video on, do your hair, make sure we're looking good. We will record it. It will be available to you shortly on our website if you want to share that out or look at it again. We have muted everybody just to eliminate background noise, but we will allow you to unmute if you have a question. We are going to manage questions through the chat function. So if you have a question, please type it in there at any point during this conversation, and I will call on you one by one to unmute yourself and ask that question aloud. And then please do remember to mute yourself afterwards. If you have a question for a specific speaker, please let them know. Otherwise, we'll try to make sure both of them can ask a question. I will close out at the end with a final question for our speakers and wrap it up right on time so we can all get on to our next Zoom call, which I'm sure will happen. So please let me, I'm gonna just give you a quick intro and bio for each of our speakers, and then we're gonna jump right in. I'll tee this up with some questions, but we are really excited for you, the audience, to ask our two amazing speakers some questions as well. So Erin Pulling, many of you know her from recent news stories and coverage. You may know her otherwise. She has served as the CEO of Food Bank of the Rockies since January of 2019. Her career has been in nonprofits, specifically including 24 years at Project Angel Heart. She's interesting. She says she thought she had her first year at Food Bank of the Rockies was really going to test her leadership. She brought on a new leadership team, a new strategic plan. She readied it for a launch of rebranding, which implemented a brand new HR, board, and operational systems. She says all of this was nothing compared to what she's had to endure during COVID-19 and what these operations have looked like. So we're very excited to hear more from her. She also admits that her job isn't nearly as difficult as her husband, who stays home with their 3 kids. And I can attest to that. The days I have to deal with my kids also, it is exhausting. I love them dearly. So kudos to your husband and all of you taking care of your kiddos. She also maintains some semblance of sanity with her early morning runs as she is chasing the Boston Marathon, and we hope you make it there, Erin. That's pretty impressive. I think I ran 2 miles the other day, so I'm almost there. Baby steps, right? And then we have Christy Judd, an old friend of mine as well. Christy Judd is the CEO of Spark the Change Colorado, formerly Metro Volunteers. Spark is Colorado's volunteer center, which provides knowledge, expertise, connections, and support to volunteers, as well as organizations that engage volunteers to do the right work. Right now, they're in a very unique position. They're supporting the state's Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management to support the volunteer needs of COVID-19. Christy is a North Dakota native, but is called Colorado home, fortunately, for over 25 years now. She loves to garden, which I need some help with, Christy, and is excited to start digging in the dirt next weekend. It's certainly been fun watching our whole neighborhood turn beautiful with flowers. So we are very excited to have both of you here with us today. Thank you so much. I'm going to start, Erin, with you and just ask you a question. And again, I'd remind the audience, if you have a question at any time, please feel free to put it in the chat box and I will call on you. But I'm going to start off with you, Erin. Food banks have certainly seen an unbelievable increase in need from the community. How have you adjusted to this, and how have you led through these demands? And start from the beginning, if you would. What did this look like right out of the gate when things started happening?
As the week before all of our worlds changed, you know, when everything closed down, like we had just started planning, like what might this look like? And it was within just that week, that very next week, we launched a whole different operational system because we provide food to about 700 food pantries in Colorado and Wyoming. We were getting calls from many of them saying, we're closing, we're gonna depend on you, please serve our community and please don't close. We convened a meeting with the other food banks in Colorado, like, what are you all thinking? And I would say we'd all had conversations, but none of us were prepared for this. So, you know, I could talk about the operational logistics, but that probably isn't as interesting to most folks here. What we saw was really the perfect storm. We depend on grocery, retail store donations of food for about 1/3 of our total supply. And overnight, our drivers were coming back with empty trucks. Like there's no food to be had. So we don't have that food. And we're having a tremendously increased need, like greater need than we've ever seen before. And now we have all these supply chain disruptions, like, okay, we will buy food. We are raising money to purchase food, and shipment after shipment that's gonna be delayed by 3 weeks, 4 weeks, or outright canceled. But I would say even more challenging in all of those operational logistics is the leadership component of this and balancing, we are all hands on deck. This is our moment. This is our organizational moment to shine with illness, childcare issues. We've had 3 incidents of known exposure here at Food Bank of the Rockies, balancing people's fear and anxiety, people leaving in tears, having to announce things like a volunteer who passed away. And just balancing people's own emotion and realizing that this is unlike any economic crisis because this is personal. And so I just think it magnifies that for every one of us.
I think you're so right. We've heard a lot of that, and that as a leader, you have to consider not just the management of the business and operations, but the individual personalities and stories, and how do you manage that, and how are you authentically showing up and leading through optimism and reality at the same time. It's not easy, so kudos for that. We'll move on. Christy, I have a question to start off with you. Again, reminding the audience, we'd love your questions. Christy, your team connects people to volunteer opportunities. We know that. This has been, of course, in high demand, specifically around virtual volunteering, but other opportunities. How have you adjusted, and what does this process look like for you in these wild, wild times?
That's probably the best definition, is wild. We, of course, generally in our everyday work do training of classes and a board connection event, and we have companies who work with us to do their managed days of service. We have a senior companion program where older adults serve older adults. All of that canceled, all of it. Right? A lot of it included the revenue that comes in to support our programs, which is how many nonprofits are struggling today. Like, if you can't do your work, you can't get the revenue you need in order to do your work. What was helpful for us was I had an opportunity to attend a Points of Light meeting in Atlanta at the end of January. And it was a meeting of about 10 affiliate directors, 2 of them from the global network. And one man, Rich Brubaker, had just flown in from Shanghai. He was on the last plane out of China with his wife, his son, and his in-laws. And he came into the meeting, and I'm not sure this was wise in hindsight, but he sat right next to me for 2 days. And he basically said, do not underestimate this virus. Do not underestimate. Nothing was going on in the United States at the time. So I had kind of a heads up. And I think from a leadership perspective, the things that really help are talking with your network about what you're seeing, even if it's not happening in your own community, that it might. So getting that kind of head start on what things might look like. And I think the other real opportunity for us is we're the disaster organization that gets called on by the state to manage volunteers in times of flood or tornado or fire or something like that. So we have some of those muscles that we could sort of dig into. So we had a chance to do a couple of things in February. One of them was train our board. So we have a board that is led by two incredible people. One has a lot of encouragement and energy. Another is really a systems. Let's think things all the way through. So right from beginning of February, we were talking about what does it look like for us to respond to a disaster that might be affecting an entire community and not just a segment of our state, right? We know that there are phases of disasters. So the first phase is preparation. So we really got a chance to think that through and figure out how will our staff work remotely. I had them all figure out what does it look like if suddenly you can't come to the office to work. And then we had the buy-in from our board and the understanding that we were going to do probably a 180 with all of our programs the minute this happened in Colorado. We were able to watch what was going on in Washington and California to see it sort of coming our way. But the other thing that we have at our, that helps us is we do have that connection with emergency managers. So we started making phone calls to the state emergency managers. We started making phone calls to the Colorado Department of Public Health and Education to find out what they were doing and how they were preparing. And the minute it started to wave into Colorado, we were seated at the table with them so we could figure out what was happening, what was closing, what did the governor need, how we could lend our brand, help Colorado Now to get people, especially donating goods or money or wanting to volunteer. So we were able to put those pieces in place. And beyond that, we're also caring for the member agencies that belong to Spark the Change, right? So we're talking to volunteer directors who are hearing from all of their volunteers that it's not safe for me to volunteer. I'm going to cancel, and I'm sure Erin, and her team have this happen quite a bit. So how do we talk to our leadership? How do we talk to our volunteers about when and how is it safe to volunteer? So we had a chance to kind of plan and prepare, and then all of a sudden, as Erin said, it just changed overnight. But we kind of had a little bit of readiness to something that nobody knew how it was going to happen.
It's so much to have to consider, especially when not knowing what's going to happen. I want to go back to something, Christy, you said, and this is a question for both of you. Many of us are on boards of directors. We answer to boards of directors. How has this changed how you're working with your board? Have your boards stepped up in different ways? What does that partnership look like right now? Christy, we'll start with you, and then Erin, I'd love to hear from you as well.
Well, one of my board members is on the call, Wailia, so she will check me if I don't get this exactly right. My board has been amazing. As I said, I've got two really good chair and vice chair, and one of the things that they got together with the executive committee to talk about was how can we, now that Christy and staff are basically doing two jobs, their regular day job and now disaster response, how can we move the organization forward without tapping into staff in a way that allows them to really function? So they put together spreadsheets for what goals they have and who's going to do what and what kind of timeline that looks like, so that they can essentially operate if they don't have to talk to me or our staff sort of at all, which is pretty incredible.
That's a good way to manage that and make sure that they have that ability to function. Yeah, I like that. Erin, what about you?
Our board has been incredibly supportive. And in order for them to step up, we have to do our part. So we've been asking the board we've basically said, you got to trust us. Our budget is out the window. I mean, within the first days of operation, we're like, actually, we're not going to pay attention right now to how much this is going to cost. We know that the community is going to be here to support us. And so we need your help in inviting donations. And so they really stepped up in that way. And now as time has gone on too, I've been like, wow, because I've been sending updates once a week with news clips and photos, and just to keep it front of mind for them. And mostly so they know, because things are changing so fast. And gosh, if we only update them once a month, I mean, the world changes in a month. And so we've been trying to, provide those updates so that they can stay engaged. And what I've been hearing from them is like, what can we do for your staff? It's amazing that this many people are working in the warehouse and driving trucks right now. So we just started a round of thank you calls too. We have a lot of staff. We have over 125 staff. And the board is dividing up that list to make thank you calls and notes to the staff of just thanking everyone for stepping up.
That's wonderful. That's great. I'm interested in that piece of it. How folks are showing up as leaders, but how we're also showing up for others right now. I imagine you guys, because you both work so closely with volunteers, how have you seen these uplifting stories or these beautiful moments? What can you share a story of something you've seen happen through the bad, but what wonderful things have you seen? Erin, do you want to keep going?
Yeah, I can start. And I think one thing I'll add too, because I know a lot of folks on the call are on boards, and I'm cognizant of this on a board that I'm on, is now is not the time for the board to be asking for a lot, for graphs and data. Like, our finance audit committee met like a week into this, and they were talking about a 6 or 12 month forecast. And we're like, are you kidding? Like 6 or 12 month forecast, we're like 4 days in. And now
6 days.
Yeah, and now we have that. But we've restructured our board meetings to, we're just going to do board reports are really simple, like bulleted, top of mind. Here's our COVID implications that our leadership team is preparing. And then we're just having a discussion. We're not doing big PowerPoints and graphs and big data presentations. So that's been really helpful. And we've also just been saying, give us some grace right now. We are all hands on deck to get this food distributed. So in terms of volunteers, yeah, we've seen countless amazing stories from either volunteers or people donating. We had someone who just walked in and made a $25 donation the other day. And he said, I was just laid off, and I know that you're going to be here for me if I need it, and for our community, so I want to make this gift. And people showing, we depend on a lot of older adults in our distribution center who are our long-time regular volunteers, as a lot of nonprofits do. And we've seen some of them drop off. And I was seeing a concerning number of them still here. And many of them are over 70. And so we formed a new partnership with the Boys and Girls Club with 30 people now through Boys and Girls Club. Their staff members are here every day. And we convened a Zoom call with our older adult volunteers. Most of them had never used Zoom. It was pretty hilarious. But the biggest message we gave is, we've got this. So if you still want to be here every day, we're not going to be giving you the side eye and wondering about your age. But if you decide that now is your time to step back, we 100% support that, and we've got this. We're going to be here, and whether it's you're coming back to volunteer tomorrow or we're not going to see you again for 9 months, we know that you support us.
That's a great message, just to ensure people understand that their safety is important and you'll be there. And that's a wonderful thing to feel as a volunteer, I'm sure. Christy, do you have a story to share?
I do. So we have, of course, we're running the Help Colorado Now volunteer database, and I think we've got something like 14 or 15,000 people signed up to help when help is needed. And I know that sometimes you want to sign up to volunteer and you can't right away because a lot of our nonprofits are not open at the moment, and the places where you can volunteer, the food banks like Food Bank of the Rockies, we've sent so many people that way, and A Precious Child is another one. We've sent a bunch of people that way, and it's just overwhelming to me that a community responds in the way that this community responds. I mean, it doesn't matter what you ask. I know today, and you want to talk about this as Giving Tuesday, I know that people are giving what they can, if they can make a financial donation. I know they're volunteering where they can, and we'll talk about that more, but just to see people going to the grocery store for their neighbors. We had a husband and wife give us a call and say, hey, in our neighborhood, we want to organize a delivery network. We want to be able to have people tell us what they need, if they need us to go to the grocery store or the pharmacy, and then we'll have volunteers run and get it, and they figured out a payment system, and it was just on the fly. We want to help people in our neighborhood, and it's that kind of people that not only get that tug of their heart, but also figure out how to connect either with a nonprofit or figure out how to volunteer within the confines of their own 80205 zip code.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just heartwarming.
I think those are some of the fun stories that are popping up, from the $25 donation to making phone calls to writing thank you notes to frontline workers. This is bringing our community together in different ways, and it is so wonderful to watch and see. I want to talk, we are the Leadership Foundation. I want to talk about leadership really quickly. And again, would love questions from the audience, but trust me, I can keep going, so no worries. So leadership, this has really brought out a different kind of leadership, I think, for a lot of folks, no matter where you are, whether you're CEO or volunteering. But talk to me, if you guys would, about a leadership skill that's really been put to the test through this. And how have you managed that? And Christy, we'll start with you since you've got the mic still.
Yeah, I think, all of us are not only trying to run our nonprofit, which they're big businesses, we're also taking on new work, or work that's been defined in a new way. And I think balancing that, how much can you ask of your staff? How much do you need to listen, and how are you caring for your staff? I think it's such a balancing act of how do you figure out which of your staff can do more, want to do more, which of your staff are struggling with personal issues, or they've got little kids running underfoot, or they've got an aging parent that they can't get to because they're behind closed doors, and maybe that person is in the last days of their life. I mean, it's just tough. And I think being a leader and having to figure out the nuts and bolts and the heart is challenging. Mm-hmm. So I'm open for ideas too. If anyone on the call is like, hey, we figured this out, Christy, it's more than Erin and I that are doing this work every day. So I think that's, from a leadership perspective, it's just a matter of how do you pay the bills at the end of the day, keep the ship sailing, and make sure that your staff is really supported.
Yeah, and I hope your staff is also thinking about you guys in the situation, because you are keeping that ship moving, but you too need that support. So I hope you're finding ways to get that, whether it be through support groups or whatever that feels like. I hope you're getting that. Erin, what about you? What leadership skill has been put to the test?
I think personally, one thing, I've always a quick acting, quick moving, and can-do attitude. A former employee used to joke, like, the answer is always yes. Like, of course, like, the answer is always yes. And I think of that times tenfold in a global pandemic. Like, yes, we are all hands on deck, and we can do it tomorrow.
Yeah.
And balancing that with, like I was saying earlier, some significant, whether it's people's mental health issues or childcare issues and illness, and just balancing that with actually what is operationally feasible and realistic, and then what is personally feasible and realistic. And what I'm having to do is slow myself down a little bit, bounce it off of someone else on the leadership team or otherwise, just to say, like, what is actually feasible here, and just tempering that. And I mean, I'm a compassionate person, but maintain and realizing that I can be a compassionate person while also having high expectations. And a lot of this for me is couched in that we've made a lot of changes here at Food Bank of the Rockies over the last year. And I do feel like this is our make it or break it opportunity in the community with our food pantry partners we work with. we've had a lot of frustration in the community going back many years that we've been unpacking and solving over the last year. And it's my perception that there's probably quite a bit of, let's see how Food Bank of the Rockies handles this. With 700 food pantry partners, can they actually increase distribution 2 to 5 times? Can we actually do that? And so it is so incredibly important. And we have received some lovely comments back. So I think that we're showing up in a great way. But in order for us to do that on a systemic and 2-state level, Colorado and Wyoming, we've got to do that with our staff as well. I've also have really been struggling with balancing. We are all darn lucky to have jobs right now with our staff is really stepping up to the plate. And, do we do a small bonus for on-site staff or extra PTO, or what does that look like? And balancing that, like reconciling that for me, because I believe that both are true. We are darn lucky to have jobs right now, and we need to recognize our frontline staff. So I think we are recognizing both of those things.
Yep. Yeah. The balance, just like you said, and I find it pretty spot on when you said at the beginning that saying yes, a lot of us have that desire to say yes all the time anyways. I have a friend and colleague on the call, Sally Hollingstead, who always says yes to everything. And now we're being asked for even more, right? And so the saying yes is happening. And I know she's stepped up. So it's hard because we do have to balance. We have to balance ourselves. We have to balance for others. And there's a lot of that being put to the test. So I appreciate that. I did get a message from Wylia Sims, a colleague, a board member of Spark the Change Colorado. She's got a question. Wylia, it's all yours.
So first, I wanted to give great kudos to Erin and Christy, because really to be on a board and have great leadership from our executive directors makes all the difference in the world. So I feel we just had a board meeting this morning with Spark the Change, and it was so much information and just learning everything that Spark the Change is doing, that Christy is doing, the press we're receiving, which I can imagine, Erin, I've seen you on TV with that great food drive that you did at Mile High Stadium. I guess it's Broncos Stadium, whatever it's called.
Empower.
Okay, Empower. So my question is, even though you guys were very generous of that, you feel like your boards are supporting you, I feel like that we could be doing so much more. And I don't know what that looks like as far as, we're doing what we can so that we're not bothering Christy, calling her all the time. But what can we do as board members, not only for you, Christy, but also for the staff?
I think it's the little things. It's like our Kind Connections program that just cropped up to help with mental health issues in our community. Sending an email or a note to the staff just to saying, hey, Kelly saw you on Good Morning America, or, hey, Betty, I know you're doing great work down in Pueblo, just we're thinking of you. It's those things that we all need, just that extra acknowledgement that everyone's working hard. I think I shared, that some of our staff are having tougher times than others, recognizing that, that they're dealing with a lot, and having that note of encouragement or that note of compassion or understanding, I think goes a long way. And then, of course, it's Giving Tuesday, and if all the board could help us push that, that would be great, Wylia. I get to talk directly to my board. That's so fun.
Karen, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well.
One thing I said before is give us some grace. Don't ask for really deep dive in data and fancy presentations right now. And I think other than that is what Christy said, is those acknowledgements go a long way. I don't think I come across as someone who needs a lot of personal kudos. Like, I generally know when I'm doing a good job, and I certainly know when I'm not. But it goes a really long way. Like I just passed a few months ago, my first year here at Food Bank of the Rockies. We had a lot of changes, a complete changeover in our leadership team. And like Elizabeth said in the intro, just a lot of organizational changes. And I would get at least a couple emails a week from board members out of the blue, like telling me how I was knocking it out of the park. And true or not, it's probably they were incorrect, but it goes a really long way. And those things really keep us going.
That's good. I know that one of my love languages is words of affirmation, so I'm on board with all of those. I think we all need to hear those things. That's helpful. I'm going to continue on with the question. So collaboration is one of our values with Colorado Civic DNA. Now is the time we're seeing a lot of that, right? And it's making a difference. And I hope it's one of those things that continues on more than we've ever seen it. I'd love to ask each of you, what kind of collaborations have you guys been working with? There's partnerships, there's collaboration. Where have you seen that show up? I know, Aaron, Southwest Airlines, and you collaborated. They donated a lot of food, but you collaborated in helping that be taken off the pallets. And there may be other more interesting stories here, but Christy, I'll pass it to you. What collaborative stories have you heard and experienced that have surprised you?
Yeah, so we just created a new partnership with PCs for People. One of the things that we discovered with our senior companion program, as I mentioned earlier, was we've got older adults serving older adults, and everyone's isolated at home, and trying to serve a need that's just being exacerbated with this, no one able to actually see anyone in person. So we went to the Corporation for National Community Service and asked them if we could pilot a virtual companion program. Well, that meant we needed equipment. We needed iPads, we needed hotspots, and we didn't have, thousands and thousands of dollars. And PCs for People is one of those great organizations that takes donated computers, desktops, laptops, iPads, and refurbish them. They put cameras in them, and then they sell them at really, really amazing prices. So we were able to get 30 iPads, one for a senior companion, one for their client, hotspots, so that we could continue to do that program, but in a brand new way. And how fun that there's another nonprofit that we could work with just immediately and solve a problem.
It's a perfect example of collaboration, right? The need is there and people stepped up to help. Aaron, what have you seen?
So we've had lots of examples of, Elizabeth, like the one you mentioned, where Southwest Airlines comes in, donates product, volunteers. Those are easy. Those are transactional, and it's really easy to show up in a really positive way for a transactional partnership. I think what's been more challenging for us as an organization is how we're collaborating with the anti-hunger community, with our 700 plus food pantry partners in Colorado and Wyoming. And we had a history, honestly, of not doing so very effectively. And that's something I didn't really realize until I came into this role just over a year ago. And we first held a listening session with about 50 of those food pantry partners. And it was the hardest meeting I've ever been through. Thank God it was facilitated. I mean, we may well have had rotten tomatoes thrown at us because there were a lot of complaints, and mostly around some operational weaknesses. And there are so many operational challenges of distributing 70 million pounds of food. And because of those challenges, we had really somewhat shrugged off some of these concerns. Things like, sometimes I order food and then that order isn't fulfilled fully. Things like that. It happens. There's lots of reasons why that happens. But organizationally, we had shrugged that off, and we had not been a convener, and we hadn't been at the table either for advocacy discussions or in the anti-hunger world. So we have made a lot of progress over the last year. And that's why I felt like with this, like, okay, people, this is our moment. Are we actually showing up? And I think what we hadn't done in the past is listening. And in order for us to show up as a collaborative partner, we need to be listening to our food pantry partners and our other anti-hunger groups about what they need from Food Bank of the Rockies. Because we can never get over the fact that we are a big organization, and that's how we're seen. So, but that's not what we should lead with. What we should lead with is how can we support our community? And in order to do that, we need to be doing a lot of listening.
I think that's so fascinating. I think listening is so important. And oftentimes we stick with tradition. We just continue on with what we've been doing instead of truly understanding what it is people need. And so I kudos to you for getting through that difficult call and finding a way to get through it. I mean, this is only going to make things better. And in that light, I do have a question. I think Kirsten has a question too, but I'm going to spit one off really quick. How do you see this COVID-19, this pandemic, impacting the future of volunteerism and philanthropy? I mean, this is going to change things, right? And hopefully a lot of times for the better, but how do you see this being impacted? Erin, I'll continue on with you if that's okay, and then we'll move to you, Christy.
Yeah, I think one thing that we've seen is a lot of unlikely partnerships. I mentioned Boys and Girls Club here volunteering every day. We've had Habitat for Humanity here. We've had so many phone calls with potential partners of everything from loaning vehicles to just companies that we would not have foreseen. So that's something that I really hope stays the same, that we look at partnerships then in a larger box than we had previously done so. We look at some of these unlikely partnerships. I also think in all of our worlds, this pace has changed. The speed at which we are expected to respond. I mean, you know, I don't know about you all, but in my normal world, if someone wants to set a meeting with me the week of, no way. I always book like 2 weeks out. Right now, like if you book 2 weeks out, you're an idiot. Like, no, like the world's gonna be completely different in 2 weeks. So every meeting I'm booking, we're booking for like the next day or, you know, 2 days later. Fine, Sunday night, got it. And hopefully that's gonna dial back to a more livable pace, I'm hoping personally. But I like the immediacy and just that can do and this positive outlook. And the overarching theme for me in all of this is that we're all in this together. And these unlikely partnerships, as well as just people supporting, like we are all in this together. And I love that just really positive optimism in our community.
That's wonderful. I want to pause really quick, Christy, before you answer. I mean, Tori Woods messaged me separately. We're clearly on the same mind. So she had the same question, but I just want to add on to it as we're answering this. And Tori, maybe you can unmute and just continue asking your questions so that other voices are heard other than mine. Are you there? Okay. Maybe, oh, mic isn't working. I just got a note. So I will ask for you then. Thank you for letting me know. This is why I love the chat function. So in addition to this, how are you reintroducing volunteer opportunities? So this is great, Christy, for you. Large or small, what safety measures might be put in place, and are you having this conversation yet? Christy?
We started having this conversation on day one because most everyone I talked to said they didn't want to engage volunteers because they did not want to put volunteers in harm's way. Mm-hmm. Typically when we're in the middle of a disaster, we're keeping volunteers from rushing to the scene to help, right? This was a time when we had to kind of pull people out and let nonprofit organizations know that it's okay to have volunteers help you. You just have to change how you're operating. You can't have more than 10 people in an area. You need to be 6 feet apart. You have to have masks. If you can do health checks, that's even better. You have to make sure that you let the volunteers know what risks there are. You have to help them have that awareness of, should I volunteer or shouldn't I? But if you're one of those people that is healthy, doesn't have an underlying medical condition, is not part of a vulnerable population, and you have the ability to volunteer, there is a lot of work that needs to be done. And so it took us probably 2 or 3 weeks to convince people that volunteers were okay, and to convince volunteers that it was safe to volunteer under these new conditions. So by way of example, we are hosting an event next week where we're packaging meals. Erin, these are the same meals that we gave you on MLK Day, if you remember the harvest pack. But we've redesigned the entire event so that volunteers aren't working next to each other. So that in addition to the hairnets and the gloves, we've got face masks on. We're doing temperature checks and health screening questions. We're making sure volunteers understand the risks and the consequences of volunteering, which may mean you could get ill, you potentially could die. Those are hard conversations to have with volunteers. But if you think about what volunteers have done in our country since its inception, volunteers are part of our Army. They're firefighters. They are people that are in harm's way a lot. And they choose to do that because they see that what they do can create a better, a healthier, more connected, more resilient community. And if we're going to get through this phase in our country, we've got to think about what that future looks like. At the Emergency Operations Center, we, of course, are talking every day about what are today's operational needs. And we're starting to talk about what does recovery look like? What does it look like in the way of financial recovery, or recovery for health systems, or recovery for parks and recreation, or recovery for everything that's been impacted? And we have to not only have volunteers that can help with food delivery systems like Food Bank of the Rockies, but we also need volunteers who have skills, who can coordinate and organize community conversations about how do we now operate as a society with these new conditions that are going to be with us for a while. So when we think about not only the Denver metro area, but across the state, how are those conversations being facilitated and by whom? What kind of skills do we need? If you're a person who has those kind of skills, this is a time when you could really be thinking about volunteering in a new way. How do you call your favorite nonprofit and say, how do we get back to business, and what does it look like from this point forward? What does it look like not only in June, but what about December, January, and next spring? Mm-hmm. So volunteering is changing, and not only have we learned virtual volunteering, but safe physical volunteering, but now let's really think about, and this is where your leadership alumni, I'll jump ahead, can really think about using their skills to help whole communities recover.
Yeah. I think it's a really neat way to think about this. I mean, there's volunteering as we know it, but now this is introducing a whole new world of how we volunteer and what skills we can use for that. So this is going to be fun to watch, and we really don't know how it will change and how often it will change, but it'll be great. Sarah Hogan, you had a question. I'd love to open this up to you to ask your question.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Happy to chime in. And Christy and Erin, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. This is such an interesting time to be reacting and responding, and you guys are doing so much on the ground work. I just can't thank you enough for what you're doing. Thinking about kind of the Leadership Foundation alumni audience, I think there are two areas where, as kind of volunteers or community supporters, we get really involved. One is board recruitment, and the other is kind of that individual donor stewardship. And I'm so curious if you and your organizations are having conversations about how things like board recruitment might change in light of being less personally connected or in-person connected to people, and the same kind of question with that individual donor stewardship.
So Erin, how about I take the board question? So we, as you know, teach a class, Introduction to Board Service, for folks that are wanting to serve on a board and haven't and want to know what that's all about. That will likely be scheduled as a virtual class so that people can still get the training they need so that they feel confident going through that board process. For nonprofit organizations, we have hosted not only our online matching database where folks can search for board members, but we've hosted a connection event in partnership with the City of Denver Office of Economic Development. We are working on systems to try to do that virtually through either meetings or Zoom, where nonprofits could be in like their own breakout room, and individuals could come and go in and out of rooms and talk to folks. So we're playing with that. We're hoping we're going to get that done. We had to cancel our spring event, but we're hoping we're going to get one done. Oops, there's my phone. Maybe later in the spring, and definitely we'll get one up and running for the fall connection event in October.
Erin, what about you?
You know, other than, like Christy said, doing more meetings remote, I don't see it really changing the recruitment process. I imagine because many of our organizations are more in the limelight right now, that there's going to be more people expressing interest in board service. So I think that the onus is on the organization and our the respective committees to really, to heavily vet. And this is a time when I hope boards are really noticing how the organizations are stepping up or not, you know, kind of what role that organization is playing right now. And I think this is just going to be somewhat of a criteria through which board members assess the organization, how none of us are ready, but how responsive were we? And then also for us to notice with board members, you know, how are board members stepping up right now? So yeah, I don't think I have the most interesting answer to that, but I think it's just another lens through which we will take any future decision making around boards.
And I think maybe we can all add professionals at Zoom conferencing to our resumes so that we are more appealing in the future, right? I want to begin to start closing out. We've got about 10 minutes left, and I have a final question, which we've kind of answered already between the two of you, but I want to give one last opportunity. We are the Leadership Foundation and Be Civic. We are all very philanthropic. We care a lot about our community. We're civically engaged. And Christy, as you mentioned earlier, today is Giving Tuesday. So beyond Giving Tuesday, which we do hope all of our alumni and members will give. We'll give to either of your organizations, but give to whoever you feel strongly about, whatever organization that might be. But beyond that, what is it that we can do as a leadership community for your organizations, for the nonprofit sector? Sarah mentioned something, we want to step up, we want to be helpful. So please let us know what we can do for you. And before you answer that, I do also want to ask the audience in the chat function, if you could type in 1 or 2 words of a takeaway from this call. We would love to hear your feedback via the chat function. Just give us 1 or 2 words on what you've taken from this call. We would appreciate that. Christy, I'll start with you. Aaron, then we'll let you finish up, and then I will round it out right at the end. So Christy, what more can we do for you and for this nonprofit industry?
I think take these conversations back into your places of work. I think it's really important, whether you're a nonprofit organization or from the private sector, that we think about how can we lead in new ways? How can we ensure that our community is whole? And what could you do, not only as an individual, but as a family or as a company, to help us heal and start to get back to business, whatever that looks like. Certainly giving of time and dollars is critical to that, but also expertise. Think about calling those places where are in your circles of influence and find out how they're doing and what they need, because the need is very different than it was last week or the week before that, right? And the need is going to be different 2 weeks from now than it is today. Mm-hmm. So I would say keep those communication lines open, call the folks where you're already connected, and just be a part of the conversation of what's next. Recovery is going to take a long time, and we need everybody involved.
Great feedback. It is going to take a long time. It's going to change often. So
yeah.
Noted. Aaron, thoughts from you?
Yeah, I think first, Elizabeth, I want to go back to your question when you were talking about board. And while I don't see this environment changing that much in our board recruitment, it's definitely changing a board engagement. And we've all seen it's just harder on a Zoom conference call. What we don't have are the few minutes before and after the meetings. That's when I tend to get so much work accomplished and conversation with people. I'm on the board of Colorado Nonprofit Association. We're planning on the upcoming meeting and having a half-hour just touch base time to hear from every person, and we're going to do it in a structured way. And so that's something that we're implementing, because I think otherwise we're just really going to be missing out. Mm-hmm. So in terms of how alumni can be involved, there's, it's always time and money. So we always need volunteer support. We're doing all right now. I think that's going to change in coming weeks when Boys and Girls Club are back. We're depending on at least 70 volunteers a day. Everyone's socially distanced, everyone's maxed. We have a 100,000 square foot facility, so it's pretty easy to do that. And so that's something we'll definitely be depending on. And when corporate groups dried up for us 7 weeks ago, we went to individuals, and hopefully we'll now see some corporate groups starting to come back. So to consider that when you feel like it is safe, and we definitely implement as many safety procedures as humanly possible here. Another thing that's more technical for us is we are about to roughly double our food supply coming in because of this government program called the Coronavirus Food Response Act. And so if anyone has expertise or knows people with expertise around product planning and forecasting, and or they have CDL drivers to loan or even available. We are hiring a lot of contract drivers, but it's nice to have some vetted people. So anyone who, we've been having someone from Coors recently lend their time on fleet management efficiencies, which has been tremendously helpful. So any expertise around product, forecasting, supply chain management, and distribution would be helpful.
Huh. Interesting. I bet you never thought you'd need those kind of talents necessarily.
And I certainly don't. That's why I'm leaning on other people.
We have to play with our strengths, right? I can appreciate that. Well, look, I have really enjoyed this conversation. I think what you two are doing, and many on this phone call have said it, is just tremendous work. I'm a nonprofit lover at heart. This means so much to me. The work that's being done is so critical and so important. And those of you on the call clearly wouldn't be here if you didn't agree. So thank you so much to both you, Erin, and you, Christy. The work you're doing, the hours you're putting in, the time you're taking to really consider every step of this is truly inspirational. We could not be this amazing community that we are without you. You mean the world to us. As we close out, I want to say we will again have this recorded. It'll be on our website probably early next week. You can check the website or the network for future virtual voices. We have them once a week through May, and then we're going to slow down the cadence a bit and have them twice a month starting in June. Next week, we will have on May 14th, our next virtual voice, and we are going to have some folks from the city of Denver, from the Denver Economic Development and Opportunity, talking to us about their relief efforts and response to COVID-19. So we hope to see you all there. Truly appreciate all of your time. I hope you enjoy the rest of your Cinco de Mayo. Maybe have a margarita or a virgin margarita on your patio later. Best of luck to all of you getting through the rest of this week. We appreciate you. Thank you again, Erin and Christy, and Be Civic. So glad to have you on the call today as well. Bye, everyone.